Well, good afternoon, dear guest speakers and audience. It is very glad to meet you all here, and I'm Cheryl, research and content analyst from Leader Associates. And I hope you are having insightful 2 hours in this live room. Well, let me first introduce you how we interact here. When we have any technical questions, please your comments in the chat box at the bottom of the screen, and our colleagues will be there to assist. And when you have a topic-related questions, please just feel free to use the Q&A section so that our guest speakers can see your questions and answers. Well, our official strategic partner is ASEAN Wind Energy, AWE 2022. It has set a precedent in Southeast Asia of a growing renewable energy community, showcasing the best wind turbine tech and solutions from across the globe. AWE provides a unique and exciting platform to network and establish long-term business relations. This year in the Adora Center, Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, from 27th to 28th October. We're here waiting for you. Well, the combined growth potential of offshore and onshore wind in Vietnam sits close to $100 by 2025, making Vietnam the golden boy. Nevertheless, the country's wind potential has yet to be tapped due to constraints around grid development, regulatory facilitation, and safety balance. So, world tourism demands and trust Vietnam, especially for its wind industry development. Here explores the state of Vietnam's wind market strategy. Well, let's start by welcoming Mr. Tann. First of all, Rajah, TotalEnergies. This is a background in working with so today we will invite you to share on the topic of policy from FIT to Offshore. Let's welcome.
So hello everyone. Yes. So the organizers, please help me to share my slide. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Wait a minute. 赛考他还要我帮他共享那个他的那个 PPT， 你开一下。好。Sorry, there's some equipment issue. Please wait me for a moment.
Yes. In the meantime, just a little bit introductions about myself. So, my name is Phat Nguyen. I'm currently the Counsel of the Vietnamese energy practice of Rajah and LCT lawyer. And before I work for Rajah and LCT lawyer, I be the legal counsel of EVN PEP 3, a member of Vietnam Electricity EVN, and I got nearly all my career on the focus on energy, and recently years in renewable energies, and now I would like to share with you a little bit on the PDPA, also the transition policy for wind power in Vietnam. I think the slide is ready. So next slide, please.
Mr. Phat?
Yes. Next slide, please.
Yeah, your slide is already okay. Please start.
Okay. Yes. Could you move to the next slide?
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. So first, I will briefly a little bit about the PDP, the RAP PDPAs, what currently is and what is changing through the time, and what we should expect from PDPA when the deadline of the end of this year becomes so close. Next slide, please. Yeah. Yes, next slide, please. For the energy transition, I believe for many of you already follow the PDPA. So there are the big difference between the version last year and the version this year, March and April, especially after the COP26, when the Prime Minister Phạm Minh Chính commit the zero carbon target. But of course, the zero carbon targets become with the condition provided that there are enough the support and got the enough requirement for the Vietnam develop. But this is a very good sign, because you could see in this slide, there are the big contribution of the renewable energy. And we can see that until 2030, the renewable energy capacity in the Vietnam power picture in general is more than 32%. And it will be reached more than 58% until 2045. And this is one of the big ambition of the Vietnamese government in general, and also the Vietnam in the big pictures. And this is also showcase the Vietnam orientation on more sustainability picture and sustainability development road. But this comes with the challenging, because the technologies, the financial, and all the other social issue coming with this kind of ambition. We are not enough time and research to say, is it practical, or is it feasible or not? But this is ambition, and it's got two faces of the coin. It's got the good face, but it's got the bad face as well. Next slide, please. And after the COP26, the Vietnamese government issued the Notice 30, and with the 8 area of focus for the Vietnamese COP26 commitment. And there are some very notable points, especially for our wind power community to not and to follow this kind of notice of the government. So the first thing is the conversion from fossil fuel to clean and green energy sources. So this is one of the key milestones of what the Vietnamese government tried to make the policy, and even the transition policy for the wind power that I will mention later on, based on this milestone, especially number 4, the R&D and use of electricity vehicle. So this is one of the next step for the full circle of development of Vietnamese renewable energy to develop at the full scale, and with the electricity vehicle also contributes either next potential support, or even one of the sources to use the renewable energy. And we can see the next one is very important one, is accelerate the conversion for climate change, because Vietnam is one of the most effective country by climate change. So this is also the very key point from the Vietnamese government. And I also want to mention about Resolution 55, when I believe every one of us may be already very well aware. But if you little bit focus on resolution 55, we could see that the COP26 ambition already go beyond. It means it's already go beyond the threshold stay in resolution 55. For example, in 2030 is only 20%. And in the last slide, I already shared with you the zero carbon already commission already go beyond this threshold. And also it's go beyond the threshold of 2045. So this is maybe the things for the community to know, that when the resolution 55 is not incompatible with the zero carbon commission, they may be the issue. So it's just the not for everyone to try to make the connection on the dot from where we're beginning with resolution 55, and it's come to the COP26 commitment, and everything keep go beyond the original target. It could be sometime the issue. Next slide, please. And I coming with the latest version of the draft PDPA, and when we focus on wind, we could see that the MOIT and the electricity institution, they got not the new view, but more clear picture of what the master plan would be. So there will be the 6 area clearly separate. We call it like 6 focus area, like the north central, the Thanh Nguyen area, the south central, and the south. And we call it like the allocation of the future development will be based on 6 focus area. And for onshore wind, clearly you can see that the Thanh Nguyen area, the south central, and the south will be got allocation with more future developed for onshore. This is for onshore until 2030. And until 2045, you could see that there are a different picture when the north and the north central and the central got more and more onshore wind. So this is a very key point, because when we got the clear pictures of 6 new focus area, we could see that there are also the connection point, or we call it like transmission connection as well. And this is also the big problem from EVN when there's the report with the overcapacity of intercapacity and inter-transmission line. That reason why the Vietnamese government tried to focus more on 6 focus area, and each area could balance their need and their power generation. So that's we call it more clear guidance on the future development. Next slide, please. And for offshore wind, there are also 5 focus areas. So again, we could see more clear guidance on the focus area of the Vietnamese government. And we could see that the 4 gigawatts of offshore wind, this is only until 2030s, is focused on the north area, the north and the north central. And also the another 3 gigawatts will be focused on the south central and the southern of Vietnam. So you could see that there are 2 big focus areas. And again, there are some southern north. This depends on the technology condition. And if you are the offshore wind developer, you will very interested is why this is two focus area. And also why they are got more and more focus on the north, because you could see that the north of Vietnam is allocate more future offshore wind generation than the south and the southern of Vietnam. One of the reasons is because the north of Vietnam is expect to experience the lacking of electricity in the future, and it could be the issue of the development. And when you could see the picture, you could somehow predict how the government will try to build on the infrastructure, and also how to connection the offshore wind with the manufacturing hub of Vietnam. Next slide, please. And I coming to the issue that I mentioned before is the inter-regional transmission. And there are already the overcapacity in the central of Vietnam, and it's become the big issue. And this year, the situation is not better than last year. And but in the future, we should expect the reconnection of that. Thank you. Next slide, please. And also the energy storage as well. Also focus on 6 focus area. So you could focus more. And now I coming to the next slide, when the transition policy, where is it and how the Vietnamese government will going from now. Next slide, please. So this is the proposed last time when the Prime Minister decision with the auction. So the Vietnamese government first coming with the auction and the selling price, also wrapping by the Ministry of Finance. So the auction is the first option coming to the Vietnamese government consideration. But the situation changed. And next slide, please. Yes, this slide. So in the report 126, just very new on July this year, the Vietnamese government is coming with 2 options. So the first option is the auction, the original idea of MOIT, but there are put also consideration of second option is the direct negotiation with EVN. And according to the report 126, the MOIT recommend the Prime Minister to go with option 2. It means the direct negotiation with EVN, because lacking of the legal background and legal support for the first option is mean auction. And that's the current situation, and it's more likely that the MOIT will collect more and more evidence or more and more opinion from another ministry to consider to finalize with option. But again, if you are the investor, you are the developer, or even you are the policy observer, you could see the clear development from the original auction plan to now with direct negotiation with EVN. And direct negotiation with EVN is also the issue, because it's not easy. And if EVN want to negotiation directly with the wind developer with the project, is not yet COD and not enjoy fixed tariff, and now want to directly negotiation. We expect that there are another 2 new circular. First circular is about the selling price. It means the MOIT will set the threshold for negotiation. But there are another circular on how to negotiation the price to put in the PPA. And this could be the very long and complex situation, especially when so many projects go together and the lacking of resources of EVN or even the EPTC, the electricity trading company of EVN. That could be the big issue as well. And all the investors should be well aware of either the case. Auction is complex, but more legal issue or direct negotiation with even more complex, and it depends on the resources of EVN to how to negotiation many PPA together at the same time. So next slide, please. So I try to mention with everyone about the new, we already mentioned about 2 new circular expect to be issued to facilitating the direct negotiation with EVN for renewable energy. And they are the current circular 57 on the year 2014. So this is the selling price, but this is for the general power plant, for example, coal power plant. So you could see that the MOT will base on the principle that they already developed over the years. For example, this circular 57 is currently available and also invalid. So there are some guidelines and some reference that the investor could be viewed and could be familiar with how to deal with all this kind of direct negotiation. You have to familiarize with the current circular on direct negotiation with EVN. After that, you're waiting for the new circular. So I just give the very brief example on this is the formula for standard power plant to calculate under the circular 57. This is the for selling price. It means the threshold for negotiation. Next slide, please. So I want to introduce you as well another circular 55, but it's 2020 is the year of the issue. This is also the PPP price. So already tell you about the selling price, the threshold that the MOT public, and for determine the PPA price under the threshold. So they are the circular 57. So you should more familiar with 2 of this circular and expect 2 new circular will be issued for renewable energy, including wind power plant. And next slide, please. Future, yes, this one for future consideration. So for the oil development so far of the Vietnamese government, we could see that the direct negotiation is get more and more attention. That reason why if you got the risk management, I think this is the correct time to prepare for the direct negotiation. And it's better to got the strategy, to got the negotiation, because the negotiation is different from the auction, because the negotiation will more and more depend on the current regulation of the MIT and also the capacity of EVN. And for the negotiation, you be the one who understand the most how to got the negotiation could be successful. Sometimes it depends on how many people negotiation at the same time and how you negotiation, how you understand well about the negotiation process. So this is the time for the repair and even the time format the strategy to prepare for the direct negotiation. So that the future consideration And that's the end of my presentation. So I hope it's helpful for you. And if you got the further question, you can contact me on the direct negotiation and another PPA dispute issue, because I follow this process closely. And thank you, and give it back to you for the organizer committee. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Phat. Here we have one question from the audience. He wants to know that is this direct negotiation only applicable for those projects didn't meet FIT, or it's well for all future projects?
According to the reports 1 to 6, it will be likely applied for the new project as well. But this is just the current proposal from the MIT, and it's not final decision of the Prime Minister, but this is the proposal, and we could expect that. That's the reason why I say that we should expect that direct negotiation become more and more get attention from all level of the Vietnamese government.
And actually, there's one question also from me. With so many changes, the auctions, the negotiation, and we also have several programs like the grid issues. Do you think that wind energy trading will become less active due to these changes in the program?
So we have to say that first, the Vietnamese government and also EVN and electric trading company at the same time, it got many pressures currently, and more pressures and more pressure on finance, pressure on human resources. So from business mind, we should understand about the Vietnamese government situation as well, and the global, we call it slowdown, and the issue as well also put more pressure on all the EVN company. So we should expect, even, for example, for direct PPA, the business community should more active. So I think that's the way to go forward. Even the EVN and EVN company become more pressure, that's in the time the business community should be more active, because that's the only way forward.
And I think there are a lot of players on the sidelines in the market at the moment. So on the financing, regarding financing issue, do you think the government will encourage more domestic or international players?
Yes, the Vietnamese government is now looking for, I believe, on the feasible and reliable finance, and also in the actually is the COP26 commitment. There are the zero carbon commitment, provided that with the condition that there are enough in international support, including the financial support from the community. So I think this is the one very huge opportunity for the international lender and international investor come into the Vietnamese renewable energy, especially the very new transmission line and infrastructure of the renewable energy and energy infrastructure in Vietnam in general. So I think this could be the challenging time, but this could be the very exciting time at the same time. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the sharing and the answer. And it's really insightful. And after the policy mechanism, let's listen to one of our international players. Well, how does Total's strategic planning for offshore wind in Vietnam adjust? Let's welcome Mr. Alban.
Thank you very much. Just give me a minute to share my presentation.
Yes, please.
Can you see it okay?
Yes, I can see it clearly.
Okay, good afternoon to all Asian participants. Good morning to people from Europe, if any. My name is Alban. I am the MD Offshore Wind Asia, and I will try to share with you some views on how to accelerate the offshore wind value chain in Vietnam. Just prior to do this, I wanted to share with you a few brief elements of TotalEnergies in the renewables and more precisely in the offshore wind sphere. We are probably not fully known by everyone in this sector. As you can see on the slide, we have ambitious objectives towards net zero 2050. We aim at reaching gross capacity of 100 gigawatts of renewables by 2030, with an intermediary step of 35 gigawatts by 2025. As you can guess, this is putting a lot of pressure on all the teams, but also a lot of excitement to identify, originate new deals, new transactions, and also, and first and foremost, identify partners to build long-term partnerships. We are exploring all technologies. We started with solar, onshore wind, and more recently, 3 years ago, we entered the offshore wind sphere. This entry into offshore wind, it's quite important to understand if you want to see where we're coming from, has been a quite logical move for us. First of all, there is an obvious match between or with our renewables and transition roadmap and the offshore wind. By nature, the unit size of the project is big. I've just mentioned the size of our ambitions. The efficiency of offshore wind, as we all know, is higher than the onshore technologies. In Europe and in some part of Asia, the technology has become fully competitive and at grid parity, and the technology bears less potential impacts with other stakeholders than onshore ones. Of course, we're doing this leveraging our own strength, coming from our experience and expertise in decades of offshore mega projects. We are also leveraging our international footprint, our balance sheet, needless to say, but also, and I want to deliver this message clearly, this DNA of ours based on partnership again. Over less than 3 years, we've built a portfolio of 10 gigawatts, portfolio balanced in terms of maturity between development, construction, and soon operation. And that gives us a complete perspective over the life cycle of the project. Portfolio balance between geographies. We started in Europe and Asia, and more recently moved to America. In Asia, we're present in Korea, in floating project, large portfolio of floating projects, and in Taiwan in construction. As you can see, we are working on both mature technology, bottom fixed, and floating technology. Just to conclude about Total, we've been present in Vietnam since 1991. And currently, 3 key areas of footprint and development: marketing and service. We have quite advanced positions in LPG distribution and lubricants, and a significant industrial footprint. Gas, power, and renewable, which is the division I belong to. We are studying LNG projects and also onshore technologies. To date, we do not have any officially announced offshore project pipeline, but obviously the objective is to have one soon, based again on good partnership. One important point, Vietnam for us is a key country on our supply chain, in particular for the fabrication of offshore foundations. Now, let me move to to the next slide. And speaking about Vietnam, more specifically, I think we all know what is on the slide here. In a way, offshore wind in Vietnam is a kind of no-brainer. When we look obviously primarily at the political drive from the government and the net zero target. When we look at the growing power needs, and I think my chart is completely outdated already. And when we also look at the fact that Vietnam is gifted with the best or amongst the best wind resources in Northern Asia, as we all know. And I think it's important to insist again on the fact that Vietnam has a very remarkable basis for fabrication, manufacturing of offshore wind foundations and equipment, and slightly more. We all know that yet there are some challenges to be overcome. Dr. Phat mentioned some of them and mentioned also the way forward set by the government to address them. The topic today is to talk about value chain. And assessment is always difficult. I'm simply referring to the paper from GWEC recently issued, saying that on the basis of 7 gigawatts, just by looking at the investment cost, we would be talking of more than $20 billion of project investment. Very interesting, I believe, around 9,000 jobs per tranche of 500 megawatt. And last but not least for Vietnam, and this is fully part of all the thinking and discussions around the PDP-8, the avoidance of dependence towards imported energy resources. There are substantial savings at stake. Let us briefly look at the value chain and let us take two perspectives. And the first one is just to look at the project life cycle. As we all know, an offshore wind project is basically can be divided into 3 stages. First stage of development, then a stage of construction, and the last one of operations. And when you look at the value chain is being defined during the stage of development, is being, say, crystallized at the financial close, meaning when all parties are together and are in agreement, and then the sponsors and the lenders can move forward. And then there is a delivery stage for the value chain where effectively value chain will materialize or not in line with the initial plans. This is during construction and operation. As you can see here, and as we can all conclude, it's essential that during this period of definition of the value chain, this period be, I would say, shortened to the extent possible and solidify, strengthen, so that whatever value is being defined for the different parties during the development, it is effectively delivered in the interest of all parties. And this is the second approach, the second perspective, which you can see somewhat summarized on these slides. This is the view from all the participants to the value chain. The very first and most important participant, obviously, are the authorities. The authorities define the roadmap, and they want to see it delivered in a timely manner. More precisely, they, of course, want to see LCOE, or price reduction, and grid parity. And they also want to ensure that such projects would have positive beneficial side effects for the national economy through investment, of course, but also through job creation. You can see here, I won't go through each of them, the other stakeholders and their own perspective. Just one word on the supply chain, which I think is essential to keep in mind, is the fact that the supply chain, both international but also local, has a unique opportunity to capture into the development of offshore wind. And by being more and more present in the offshore wind supply chain in the country, but of course also overseas, regionally and internationally. In short, this crystallization of value chain happens at financial close, as we said, at the end of the development period. And this is when all the one-to-one or two-to-one agreements which we can draw on this slide are effectively concluded. The value chain creation is not static. It's a dynamic thing. There are constant reallocation of values between the different parties. And this is chiefly linked to the level of risk in the development of the project. But let us not forget the topic of this intervention today, which is how to accelerate, how to effectively deliver this trend of significant reduction of tariff coming alongside with the delivery of the gigawatt objective. And this will lead me to my conclusion. Very humbly, but based on our experience over the different countries I've named in Asia, but not only, what we have observed is that the fundamental point for a new country in this offshore wind sphere is to be able to come to the first delivery or the delivery of first projects as quickly as possible and in the more robust way as possible, meaning that deciding on project as quickly as possible, but also making sure that the very first project would be and will be successful ones and will be built on time. Practically, just putting a few ideas here, and as mentioned and by many players and also indicated in the previous presentation, but idea of having a kind of transition period during which the tariff would be set again with this objective to kickstart things is something absolutely needed. The selection of consortium is something fundamental as well, with this objective to ensure a successful delivery of project. Not anyone or everyone alone is able to deliver an offshore wind project. And we can see this based on our portfolio. This is extremely complex and definitely requires experience and track record. And of course, there is a last point regarding this acceleration of the development phase, which has to do with the simplification of the overall permitting process. So to cut it short, I was asked to give a view on behalf of TotalEnergies on the acceleration of value chain in Vietnam. And my conclusion would be there is a tremendous opportunity for creating a massive value chain in Vietnam, whatever the figures, but it will be big. And our views is that the absolute priority is to kickstart something which has all potential to become a virtuous circle for all players, but in priority for Vietnam. Thank you very much. I'm glad to take any question now or later. Probably we're a bit late. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Alban. Here I have several questions for you. Well, you mentioned many attractiveness of the offshore wind in the Vietnam, but I still noticed that at the moment, I think there's mainly onshore wind projects. So what's the reason for you to choosing offshore but not onshore? And what exactly are you estimated for the LCOE of the offshore wind?
I can't hear you very well. I'm sorry, but I assume I've got most of your question. The choice between offshore and onshore.
Yes.
We are looking at both. As a matter of fact, I am myself heading the development of offshore. But in my slides, I've tried to summarize why offshore wind for us. And again, primarily offshore wind, thanks to access to more stable wind and higher and better wind resources, thanks to less impact, and thanks to bigger unit size, has a specific attractiveness to us. And we tend to believe that in a number of instances, although more complex, but it could be more efficient and beneficial.
And you also mentioned to reduction the LCOE part. What exactly is the number of your estimation of the offshore wind LCOE by now?
Oh, you are asking an extremely difficult question. I think the way to answer this would typically to look at what's happening in other countries. You don't have, you can't always strictly compare one country with another. But I simply suggest you typically look at what was the kind of feed-in tariff at the beginning of the process in Taiwan and what it is now, and things are public. At the same time, once a country has been able to kickstart a process by effectively providing an encouraging price, I would say. So once the virtuous circle is in place, everywhere in the world, there has been a shift, a move towards competition, and also towards, I would say, quite sophisticated remuneration schemes for the investors, receiving money not only from the power, from the electrons, but also from the green attributes which come along with the green energy. So I'm not answering directly to your question. I'm suggesting you to look at what's happening in the different country, and I mean, we can set the scene. Currently in China mainland, you've got prices, what is called coal benchmark price, which is more or less around an equivalent of $50 to $60 per megawatt hour. This is more or less what has been observed in the last French tender. But again, we are not necessarily strictly comparing like with like. Whereas the very last auctions in Taiwan typically were slightly below $100 per megawatt hour. But again, those prices are not prices to launch, to kickstart a project.
Well, okay, thank you, Mr. Alban. Thank you for the generous sharing. And
thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Mr. Saiki from Renova will share with us his views on how to minimize the risks that we encounter from the planning to the executive project. Let's welcome him.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. Let me share the slide here. Does this work?
Yes.
Good, good. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone in Asia. and good morning for those in Europe. My name is Saiki from Renova. Before jumping into the main topic, I'd like to introduce myself and also our company, Renova. So I'm from Renova, Executive Officer and co-head of the global business Renova. I've been working in renewable energy IPP business for years, and I started my professional career at investment banking and followed by the project financing practice in commercial banks. So I'm originally from financing background, and Renova is developer. So today's topic, how to mitigate the risks in Vietnam's wind power in advance. I will be speaking from the developer's perspective, and it's not legal or authority perspective, and will be more of the practical risk management. Okay. Now, moving on, not sure if I can successfully show the slides. Okay, good. So, quick introduction of Renova. Renova is a Tokyo headquartered renewable energy focused IPP and developer. So we are the only company listed in Tokyo Stock Exchange who only focuses on renewable energy. We have around a market cap of $2.5 billion, and we developed 5 types of renewable energy: solar PV, onshore offshore wind, geothermal, biomass, and hydro. Although many of the projects are focused in Japan as mother market, we have subsidiary and projects in Vietnam. So in Vietnam, we have 3 onshore wind projects, namely Lien Lap, Phong Huy, and Phong Nguyen. Each has 48 megawatts, and they are all located in Quang Tri province near the border with Lao PDR. So we, together with our partner, PC1 Group, they used to be called PCC1. We are jointly started the project planning late 2019 and proceeded to the project design, procurement, construction, debt financing, and successfully achieved the commercial operation in October last year and secured a feed-in tariff at 8.5 cents. Now the projects are successfully running in the Quang Tri and producing power to Vietnam grid. For debt financing, it was the very first transaction that ADB, Asian Development Bank, provided the debt financing to wind projects in Vietnam, together with Export Finance Australia and JICA from Japan in May last year. So we have track record and experiences in Japan, and also we do have the footprint in Vietnam. And I'd like to proceed to jump on to today's topic, the risk management in Vietnam. Now, the risk, by definition, is an uncertain event or condition that, if it occurs, has a positive or negative effect on an objective. So this is a definition at the PMBOK. And usually in the risk management textbook, you will find that there are 4 types of mitigation. Either you avoid, reduce, transfer, or accept those risks. Okay? So I will follow these definitions and methodology in speaking of the Vietnam wind power risks. Now, depending on where you are from, what factor, what value chain you are engaged in, you may have different views. But from the developer's perspective, the risks of the Vietnam wind power, I can name 2 major points, which are the regulatory uncertainty and PPA. Now, today I will not touch upon the risks that are prevailing in other markets, like for example, wind resources or construction risks, because these are not unique to Vietnam that you can find anywhere in the world, or the issues that doesn't have any uncertainty. So for example, it will probably not likely that the Vietnam government or EVN will agree to change the PPA terms drastically. So this is not a risk, but actually it's a fact or issues already there. Now, regulatory uncertainty, the 3 major items that I can come up with. The first thing is the permits and licenses are not granted to the project. So assume that you're working on your specific project and you're uncertain whether, for example, the survey license or PDP approval or PPA signing may happen for your project. Now, single and most powerful mitigation for such risk is probably you just avoid the risk, meaning that you only work on those projects with approval. So if you simply work with a project which has got the PPA or PDP approval, it is a perfect mitigation of the risk. Often cases, such projects are difficult to come by, or a lot of more expensive price tags attached to those projects. And if there are any developers and sponsors who like to work on more greener projects, one mitigation is to engage Vietnam native workforce, either as a co-developer or in-house players. So from our perspective, our team in Vietnam, subsidiary in Vietnam, has a number of the team there and have good understanding in the market and traditions. And we also typically work with a partner who's a Vietnamese company and has good understanding of the permit workflow. So this is one mitigation in permit and licenses as to the project. Now, the second point that I think of is the regulatory framework not established as expected. So one example is we do not know when the PDPA will be announced, or as Mr. Phat mentioned earlier, how the tariff will be determined in the future, whether it will be through the direct negotiation with EVN or through the auction mechanism. There are a lot of information, draft circulated, but no one so far has got the final confirmation yet. So under such uncertainty, private investors are not likely to be able to proceed to the investment planning or investment decision. How we work on that? Now, regulatory framework applies to all the projects in Vietnam. So therefore, it is not likely that a single project can maneuver the terms or requirements. So we do think that it has to be accepted. But one way to reduce the risk is to work closely with industry players to be alerted and ready. So one typical example is, for instance, today we have a lot of expertise and professionals who know more about the industries and market and permits. So putting your antenna later high and get the information as soon as possible probably is better strategy to win the game and beat the competitors. The third point is the strict local content is required. Now, unlike Taiwan or any other market, the Vietnam hasn't strictly required local content for wind industry. And this is related to supply chain matters. Mr. Alban from Total mentioned about the supply chain, but there's a possibility that Vietnam may require certain local content. Now, we do think that this point needs to be accepted to a certain extent because it's regulation if it's implemented. But the one way to reduce is to, similar to the second point, engage contractors, suppliers, or consultants as early as possible. Now, although it's not yet in the regulation as of today, from the return perspective, I consider that more and more local content, meaning local contractors, suppliers, are getting essential in the projects in Vietnam from the return perspective. So for instance, our projects in country, the turbines were imported from, were purchased from investors, and they are manufacturers in China and Europe. But other than the turbine itself, the BOP components were pretty much contracted with the contractors in Vietnam, towers for manufacturers in the country, and transportation, civil works, foundation works, investigations were all done with our contract partners. So essentially, the local content effectively is getting required more and more nowadays. Now, speaking of the PPA, there are three key points that I would like to discuss. The first point is off-taker EVN. Now, if you consider this as a risk, I have to say that there's no way that you can change the off-taker. So if you want to avoid a risk, probably Vietnam may not be the best market for you, right? One way that are, as you know, currently floated an idea is the corporate PPA or indirect PPA, as it's called in Vietnam. So as you know, the Vietnam government is floating an idea to make it happen that the suppliers and power users can enter into the contract. Effectively is contract for difference type of the contract and allows the direct PPA arrangement. The pilot projects are going to be implemented sometime early next year, but as compared to other deregulated market in Asia or other part of the region, corporate PPA has not yet been properly established in the country, but may have room for further expansion. So this could be a way of the risk mitigation for the PPA of the operators. The second, and perhaps one of the high areas of interest of the market player is the curtailment issues. As you may know, certain areas and projects, not only for the wind, but also the solar projects have experienced a curtailment in very significant manner. Although, given the PPA terms, although it's not possible to fully contractually mitigate the curtailment risk, but a few ways to reduce the risk is before getting to the project, there are a certain wide study on the grid expansion plan by EVN, or you may be able to speak with the consultants who have the grid information and can provide the grid curtailment or constraint projections in the coming years. So that could be one way to reduce the risk by knowing the risk factor and probability of the risk event happening in the future. Grid connection plan of the specific project that you're working on, whether it will be connected to 110 kV, 200 kV, or 500 kV substation, and how many projects are planned in that very specific region or province or connected to that substation, is another important information that usually we do look at and factor into the grid constraint perspective. The last part, cherry pick, means that it's basically an acceptance. So curtailment will happen in Vietnam. And also, if you look at the other markets, also in Japan, also in a lot of markets, probably it will be more and more difficult to expect that the off-taker take on the curtailment risks. So the IPP side, the project side, are expected to take on the curtailment risk to a certain extent. So the last resort and protection for the power developer and sponsors is to accept a certain level of curtailment, whether 1%, 3%, 5%, which depends on the project and areas that you develop the project, and do the simulation whether such curtailment can be accepted from the return perspective. So in other words, it is very obvious, but if you try to cherry pick the projects with better wind resources or expectedly better return, there's a good buffer that you can still accept the haircut in curtailment. The last part is that the tariff. So on top of the curtailment, at this point in time, no one knows what exactly the tariff will be for the future wind projects, whether this is onshore or nearshore or offshore, right? Only practical way to mitigate with the tariff is basically we need to accept the tariff set by the government. It needs to look at the project where the project makes economic sense given the tariff determined. Again, usually as a developer, the way we look at the risk is we will pursue the project with the best cost performance, meaning that with best wind resources first and the areas with the lowest cost implications. Things may not be that simple in the real world, but these are the principles that we usually follow and try to follow that order. So in other words, if offshore wind projects or onshore wind projects takes place in Vietnam in the future, in the world that tariff we do not know, the projects in the best location or most cost efficient one should be the one who takes ahead first. So that is the basic strategy that a developer like us should usually follow. So this is the end of my quick presentation. And again, these risk factors are something that no one has the clear-cut answer. It's not black and white, and I'm more than happy to hear any thoughts or discussions that the audience has. Thank you, and back to you, Cheryl.
Well, thank you, Mr. Kai. Thank you for the presentation, and it's quite insightful, and I have learned a lot from it. Well, I assume you are very familiar with both the Japan and the Vietnam market. And also, I think the Japan wind market also, well, experienced a lot this year, the auction things. Can you make a comparison between these two markets, and what can we learn from, well, from the Japanese wind market?
Right, thank you, Sherry, for raising that. From regulatory perspective, the Japan market is not so different from Vietnam, actually. So the regulations have been set up only a few years ago, and only the first round of the large-scale offshore auction had took place end of last year. Okay. Vietnam also is trying to formulate the regulations and rules, who's going to do what, and who's going to make the decision, and the design of the auction is taking place. So it's only a few notches away. If you look at the other markets, like for example, Taiwan, as you may know, has much more advanced. It's more centralized approach that the government set out, draw the lines, and publicize the water areas, and put the tender and solicited the proposals from the private investors. So it's a good showcase that they could have attract a lot of the private investors, both within the country and also from the foreign players, and succeeded in capturing the low-cost power sources from all around the world.
Well, thank you for that. And you mentioned a number of categories of risks and some solutions. Well, one of our audience was particularly concerned about the equipment depreciation risk and the land acquisition regulation. Could you please explain this more?
Sure, thank you. So these are actually the areas that we as a foreign developer are at most capable of, to be very honest, right? So Renova is also a developer in Japan, and these are areas that we are capable in our mother market. And although we do have ambition to be knowledgeable and capable in these matters in Vietnam as well, we only started the work in Vietnam several years ago, and we do know that there are certain things that are still implicitly difficult for the foreign players to tackle in. So areas like the land compensation, permitting, as I mentioned in the slides, our practical approach at the moment is to build up the native Vietnamese power forces in the country, and also the areas that we are not so capable, we always try to work for the Vietnam native players who are willing to work with the foreign players, right? So it's a supplemental combination and synergies between the two companies, as we do have good experiences in wind technology, turbine procurement, construction, debt financing, and these are the value that we can offer to those who are keen to work with foreign players.
Well, thank you very much for the answer, and I do appreciate this presentation. Well, our presenters today have very carefully explained the market mechanisms, value chains, risk mitigation, and thanks for the show. Next, let's invite more market players to discuss the next step of the wind energy market in Vietnam, and let's find, well, which one is more popular? It's the public offtake, wind CPPA, or green hydrogen. Mr. Trung, are you here? I would like to leave our room to you.
Thank you, Cherry.
Yeah.
My pleasure to be here. And good afternoon, everyone. It is my honor to be the moderator of the topic today, Vietnam possibilities of diversified route, public uptake, wind CPPA, green hydrogen, and the other things. A quick introduction about myself. My name is Trung, director at KPMG. I'm in charge of the power sector. I've been involved in providing tax accounting and due diligence service for a number of power projects, and with a total capacity of more than 40 gigawatts. Joining me today, we have a very experienced and diversity of panelists. They are the investor, developer, operator, and the legal advisor. First of all, I would like to introduce Mr. Oman Singh, Regional Director of Hero Future Energy. Mr. Oman Singh, can you introduce about yourself?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Trung. My name is Oman Singh. I'm the Regional Director for the Southeast Asian market with Hero Future Energies, and I'm based out of Singapore. It's a pleasure for me to be speaking to you today in the panel on Vietnam's possibilities for diversified routes into the market. Let me just quickly give you a quick introduction of Hero Future Energies. We are a renewable energy IPP with about 1.6 gigawatts of capacity installed globally. We are a pure play RE player, and we are involved in the solar, wind, and hybrid technologies sector. And also we've been quite active in the recent past couple of years in rooftop projects or captive and industrial projects. Our shareholders include the Hero Group, which is a large conglomerate in India, International Finance Corporation, and Mazda. We do have offices spread out globally. In this region, we've been active in Vietnam for the past 5 years or so, and we've been involved in solar and wind power projects in various stages of development as of now. And recently, we've also ventured into rooftop solar. We have offices in both Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi. So that's a quick introduction by myself. Back to you, Trung.
Thank you, Mr. Oman Singh.
Yes.
Next, I would like to introduce Mr. Thinh, CEO of Binh Wind Power. Mr. Thinh, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Thinh. I am the CEO of Binh Wind stock company, PBW. Our company joined the renewable energy in Vietnam almost from beginning. And up to now, we have 3 wind power projects under operation. I am also the chairman of the local wind and solar association. Very nice to meet you here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thinh. Next, Mr. Nghiem, Investment Director, Energy of Saigon Asset Management. Would you please? Thank you.
Okay. good afternoon, everyone in Asia and probably someone in Europe as well, right? My name is Nghiem, and I'm leading an office for Saigon Asset Management, focusing on renewables energy investment. So Saigon Asset Management is a fund management firm. It's still our core business, and we established here in Vietnam since 2007. By the end of 2020, we have a new office focused on renewables energies and infrastructure. And at this moment, our team is trying to develop, I think, one of the first and pilot projects in Vietnam for hydrogen power generation. So our partner is from France. It's called Hydrogen de France. And we are working with the provincial government to start the permit license of the project. I think, if things goes well, by the end of 2024, we can start the construction. So I can see that it's very promising areas in here. We also provide advisory service, mostly in the financing sectors, and we are following with the current activities related to carbon trading and REC as well. So I'm really happy to join the panelists today because I know so many of the the moderators. I worked for Oman before. So it's so great to see everyone in here, and I really hope that after this one we can have some chance to see each other in real life, not just in a virtual platform like this one. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Hoang. I believe that hydrogen is very potential for the future development of the power sector in Vietnam. And next, we have Mr. Nguyen, a specialist in hydrogen also. Would you please introduce about yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Trung and Leader Associate for invitation. My name is Nguyen, and in Vietnamese it's Dinh Van Nguyen. I get a number of you know me. My origin from Vietnam, and currently I'm working across the globe, looking at global projects in renewable energy, offshore wind, hydrogen. And my role, I have two roles. One is the principal consultant for renewable energy, including offshore wind for Vietnam market, beside other market. And the other role is looking at the hydrogen business service over the globe. And I'm from ODC, a company of the ABL Group. We are independent global consultancy, providing a consultancy service for renewable hydrogen marine. And we've been in Vietnam for about 28 years, supporting the marine aspect. And now, recently, in the last few years, we support renewable energy and especially the offshore wind. Yeah, so I'm happy to engage with you and to support answering questions regarding renewable and hydrogen. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nguyen. And the last but not least, we have here Mr. Hai from Baker McKenzie. Hai is very famous in the renewable market here in Vietnam. And Hai, please go ahead with your introduction here.
Thanks, Mr. Trung, for your kind word. Actually, I really enjoy catching up with everyone regularly and discuss things like this, even though we have been discussing things over many years, talking the same thing and just trying to catch up so that we can do business together and help the people in our conference. So I'm really enjoying. Actually, today is a really busy day with a lot of major deals. I'm really focusing on leading those mostly project M&A transaction and project finance. But I really enjoy to have a catch up and discuss with everyone. Yeah, just for those who don't know me, my name is Hai. I'm a partner in charge of energy, mining, natural resources climate change and infrastructure at Baker McKenzie law firm. So basically, Baker McKenzie, international law firm in Vietnam. We have been operating in Vietnam for 29 years. So it's just a few months ahead for us to organize 13 years anniversary in Vietnam. We have office in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. Very big team supporting and working in this sector. For myself, I have been heading up a energy and infrastructure department in the Hanoi office, mainly supporting developers, sponsor, financier, and stakeholder involved on this kind of sector, from renewable energy to conventional and technology, and also different kinds of infrastructure projects. Sometimes I also involved in technical support, actually work with KPMG a lot together on many of those projects to provide support like legal review of regulation, training, sharing for different stakeholders here in Vietnam. So I just want to keep it short given the time constraint for our discussion. So I think that's about it for my end. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Hai, and let the discussion start. And I believe that the audience are looking forward to your expertise and comment for the next question I'm about to ask you. Let's begin with Mr. Oman Singh. What do you think? What do you imagine about the Vietnam energy market in the next 3 to 5 years, and whether the battery storage or CPPA, corporate power purchase agreement, can play an important role during this period? Please, Mr. Oman.
All right, thanks, Trung. Let's start with the easy part of it, which is the technical potential. So what we have seen, and what we also see in many of the reports that have been published by World Bank and also other groups, is that Vietnam, spread from north to south over 2,000 kilometers, has a very high potential in wind energy. We see there's a lot of sites onshore with wind speeds above 6 to 7 meters per second, which is a good wind speed for development of wind power projects. We know that wind is more stable throughout the day, unlike solar that is more variable and generates during the sunny hours. While wind, we have a decent profile throughout the day and night. And more so for offshore wind, which is something that's a bit more stable over the entire day, and we see higher wind speeds as well. So the key question is that over the next 3 to 5 years, how does this capacity, which have been proposed anywhere from 20 gigawatts to 50 gigawatts, can translate into actual operational capacity? That's a bit of a challenge. I think in terms of the technical potential itself, wind can generate almost the entire energy requirement for the whole of Vietnam in the next 5 years if the policy is in place. And I think that's the key word there, because renewable energy is very much policy driven. Just to go back, I think somewhere in 2011, 2012, I had also been involved in renewable energy back then, and there was the first round of FIT for wind. And there had been a very poor uptake for wind projects because costs were very high in comparison to the feed-in tariff. However, in the next feed-in tariff, just the one most recently, last year, we saw almost 4 gigawatt constructed. Not all of them met the feed-in tariff deadline. Some of them are still waiting for a tariff, but that had driven the construction of the 4 gigawatts. However, since then, we've not seen what will happen next. The key aspect is that the policy needs to be in place, and the market will then chase after this policy. As of now, what we have clarity on is that there will be a DPPA, direct PPA mechanism, and that is still limited to a small capacity, somewhere around 1 gigawatts. I don't know if they will increase it to 2 gigawatts or 3 gigawatts. The next offtake mechanism that's being discussed is the auction, and that mechanism is still unclear on how it will be implemented. The challenge is that if an auction mechanism is announced, to have everything in place will take at least a year or so, And that will take up a substantial amount of time in development to have these plants online. I think in terms of the offtake, ideally, as an investor, what we would be looking for is long-term fixed storage contracts, fixed term contracts. So this is likely with EVN. Corporate PPAs are a bit difficult because we'd have to bundle a large number of projects for a single, let's say, large wind site. The other challenge is financing this project. Now, if you want to see a large capacity coming on board, it will require significant foreign debt and equity. And we would want to see more PPAs with EVN rather than having corporate PPAs. So as in short, I think the public offtake mechanism with EVN is still the most attractive for investors. And for the others, I think it's going to be something that will come in phases. If the market truly opens, then we would see more corporate PPAs in play. Your next question is on battery storage. I think I just try to go through this quickly. When we look at renewables, I guess the first impression is that renewables is intermittent. Now, what was interesting was that last week I was in Philippines, and there was a presentation that showed that in last year, in the island of Visayas, 45% of the energy was generated by renewables. And what was observed was that the renewable energy was not intermittent. In fact, it was predictable. So basically it varies throughout the day, but it's within the norms of being predictable. And more so when you consolidate this with multiple plants across the entire island, or perhaps even the entire country, it becomes something that is not something that can be called as intermittent. The message there was that the grid operator can accept up to 50% renewable energy in the grid with the current technology. So in the market, when the question comes up whether we should have battery storage or not, the general consensus is that once renewable energy penetration increases above 15-20%, we will need some kind of ancillary services from batteries. However, don't forget, we do have existing gas peaker plants. We do have coal plants that can provide inertia that are already existing in the grid, particularly in Vietnam. So if the grid is large enough, is stable enough, like what we see in Vietnam, the need for ancillary services like battery storage will actually reduce. And the larger impact that we have seen is that there's a dark curve caused by solar power projects that generate during the day, during the peak hours. And also when we combine this with rooftops that use energy for self-consumption, when their demand decreases from the grid, at the same time there's more solar going into the grid, there's going to be a bit of a mismatch, and that's why we see curtailment in certain regions. But I think economically, when we look at this, will batteries come into the picture for Vietnam? The question would then be, who will pay for this, right? Is the cost justified? As of now, the load shifting will only benefit cases where a plant is curtailed and cannot sell to the grid. But if, let's say, according to one of the recent EVN drafts, that projects need to have 25% battery storage, the question then will be, the net levelized cost for these projects will increase. And would EVN be willing to pay for this increase without actually having these projects generate much value in terms of stability into the grid?
Yeah, I totally agree with you that this is now when we talk about battery, who will bear the cost and
Yes.
how EVN factor in their cost of the purchase. And by the way, thank you, Oman, for that. When you mentioned about the corporate PPA and DPPA, we all know that the DPPA regulation had been on the dash for the regulator for years already.
Yes.
So here the question for Mr. Hai. Do you have any inside information with that regulation, and how about the PDPA, sorry, are gonna be issue because I understand that a few days ago the Prime Minister just returned the latest draft back to the MOIT to revise some point on that PDPA. Please, Mr. Hai.
Yeah, sure. So this is the most difficult question because it involves a lot of stakeholder, public and private. So thanks for giving me the most difficult question. Yeah, of course, right now, yeah, everyone waiting for PDPA. As you can see from the draft, among, over the past 3 years or so, I think you can see that the draft in the past 4 months or so, more and more to clarify things and clarify, the expectation of different stakeholder and also the key change, the strategy. But in terms of the capacity and also the key, principle, basically they remain quite, the same, just some minor adjustment to clarify. So there's still a lot of communication between MOIT, Office of Government, and relevant ministry to clarify those points. Most significantly on the, not just the many coal project to be converted to gas to power, also even for solar PV capacity, there's still discussion around. I think the clarification on 2.4 gigawatt is quite clear for those who already obtained investment approval, because under investment law, they should have some basis to going forward to continue. But there is not certainty about around the remaining 4 gigawatt for those under PDP 7 revised. So still need to clarify. And also for offshore wind, we are already very clear about 7 gigawatt by 2030. But there's still need to more discussion around, transmission and other things for the purpose of utilizing those projects. So all of the detail like that work together as a one single master plan. In the plan, obviously, as we all know that formally recently in the COP26 implemented plan, there are indication about the timeline for PDPA by the end by 2020, right? But this is very general. Actually, we all know that they should be subject to further review from the government. But I said they quite, quite close in terms of the detail. So we hope that the draft can be finalized and subject to some additional procedure. They can be finalized soon, and the people. And obviously, PDPA not just the final one. After PDPA, we have a sub-implementing plan. Usually, MYT plan to have a review like every 2 years or so. And upcoming, regulation on DPPA pilot program to transitional project, and also, additional mechanism. So all of these details will need to be worked together. We have been support quite a few international organizations on legal study for auction mechanism, for example. Actually, this is the issue not new, because we have been discussed with the MOIT for over four years already on this kind of mechanism. So for transitional project, I think this is the situation for wind project now under construction 3 gigawatt, quite similar to the story we discussed with MOIT in before June 2029, when the people asking about what happened if 80 solar FIT 1 project at that time, if they failed to meet the FIT deadline, what happened? So we already discussed a lot on model with MYT at that time, how to prepare for new mechanism. We review bidding law, investment law, all kind of mechanism, EVN role. And I think the most important question right now is who is the auctioneer. So there are a lot of discussion around whether it's MYT or Monterey for offshore wind, or provincial authority and EVN. So the key point here is how to involve all of the stakeholders in the one single mechanism. That is the key question. They caused a lot of delay over the years. So there's some distinction, as we all know that there's some distinction about project. They have investment approval had been determined. It means that owner of the project had been determined, like transitional project. So it doesn't make sense for the province to run any additional tender because owner already confirmed. So for those kind of auction, that's why EVN tender or direct negotiation had been discussed in the last 1 year. But more recently, as we already know, they seem to link with the direct negotiation because it's more straightforward actually. And from our experience in negotiating the PPA with EVN from conventional 5-6 years ago, it takes like 6 months or so for each contract. So I think if we have 80 PPA like this, different company, different project, strategy different between the north and the south, as we know, right? At the north, we have increased demand for the next 5 years. There's some project there can be prioritized. So all these details need to be considered from a strategy perspective. So obviously that is not easy, but I understand that. I believe that there would be some gradually, a transition. And obviously we see that this is more a matter of timing. In terms of corporate PPA, I think it's quite separate from PDPA, but there's still some interaction because if we are trying to, the recent draft of PPA, and we all know that from a developer's perspective, we have some additional requirement like investment approval. So it means that the prioritized for DPPA is more for those who have advanced state like investment approval already or construct contract, things like that have been procured. Those projects, both wind and solar PV, can be participate on DPPA. One of the key points here is the Prime Minister decision at the legal document, because we already discussed for 4 or 5 years around whether or not under the law on law in Vietnam, the law on issue and legal document, there are questions about Prime Minister decision can issue all kind of policy regulation like this, or it need to be government decision. Of course, decision from Prime Minister would be more straightforward, but actually not really straightforward. MYT and obviously MOJ, the Ministry of Justice, have highly involved on the legal formulating process. So, but I believe that sooner or later, DPPA is still quite, in line with the trend in the world, as well as the existing CNI business in Vietnam, particularly for renewable I-100 corporate power consumer, very keen on that. A lot of them have been discussed with Iraq, MYT, so there's a clear basis that they should continue. So I just hope for formalizing the procedure to get it done in Vietnam soon.
Thank you, Mr. Hai. And I have the same feeling with you and the same understanding with you that PDP-8 will take a lot of effort from the government, not only MOIT but other stakeholders also. The other regulation like the pricing mechanism for the transition project. Just to elaborate more on the transition project, it means that the project already often own the license requirement, but they cannot meet the COD deadline for the feed-in tariff. Currently, they don't have the pricing mechanism for selling electricity. On those relevant DPPA transition pricing mechanism, I believe the government is trying to wait until the PDP-8 to be finalized, then the other regulation will come after. That my personal sense only, and hopefully the PDP-8 can be finalized by the end of this year, and new project will be coming very soon for the next year. Yeah, that about the situation of the PDP and the regulation for the future development. But one of the key important issue here in the PDPS is the government they put something on hydrogen in their plan. I would like to hear from Mr. Nguyen, Dr. Nguyen, that what do you think, whether it is feasible for the time being when people invest into, let's say, offshore wind and to create green hydrogen for the time being? Please, Mr. Nguyen, Dr. Nguyen.
Thank you, Mr. Trung, for question. Also for Thanh the panelists, Mr. Oman Singh, Mr. Thinh, and Mr. Hai very much, and Mr. Nghiem as well, for the previous answer that make things clear and the kind of prerequisites for me to answer the question about hydrogen. So before answering directly to the question raised by Mr. Trung, I would like to summarize the current situation in Vietnam regarding power and development. Firstly, is the policy very slow, and grid electricity grid power grid infrastructure is very under development. That's why it leads to the very high rate of curtailment by the existing power generation from renewable source. And that curtailment and that delay in policy may possibly lead to the high cost of electricity production and the high cost of supply chain, because supply is not continuous. Sometimes they peaking during the peak time, and then they have nothing to do during recent time. Maybe a year they don't have anything to do. So very high cost of supply chain. So now back to the question, what is hydrogen? Hydrogen is a way of converting energy from power, electricity to the other fuel through electrochemical, and hydrogen very promising, very future bright. However, technology is very expensive. What the viability of hydrogen? It depends on a number of factors, but majorly depend on the cost of electricity, about 60–70%. Yeah, when the carpet cut electrolyzer infrastructure going down, hopefully by 2030. And then it still heavily depends on electricity cost. However, electricity cost in Vietnam is higher compared to the adjacent country because of the development cost, the CapEx, supply chain cost, policy cost. So electricity is a bit more domestic. It has been consumed within the country. However, hydrogen is the energy carrier. It can store a long time. It can use for exporting. So it can be more competitive globally, regionally. So if we have higher cost of hydrogen, it's very difficult to compete. Yeah. So for Vietnam, in order to get hydrogen to be viable, we need to get electricity cost to be lower, or at least comparable to the neighboring country. Yeah. So to answer more directly to the question, I would think that hydrogen, whether it's viable, depends on the vision of the policy and the vision of the company who developing hydrogen project. So it's a process of consultancy and process of development that we're working with the developer investor. Yeah. So hopefully that's my question.
Thank you, Dr. Nguyen. And I totally agree with you that on the same question, I would like to ask Mr. Hoang, because at the beginning you shared that you are investing in a hydrogen project. Can you share with us what factor that make your company decide to invest into that field, and what is the difficulty that you are facing, please?
Okay, thank you, anh Trung and anh Nguyen for your sharing. Let's talk about hydrogen applications for Vietnam. So right now, we will face a natural gas shortage in the near future. That's the fact. And to replace that natural gas shortage, we would have to rely on either LNGs or hydrogens. And that hydrogen could be used as the feed-in stock for chemical plants, or just to burn in a thermal power plant. So depending on the applications, we would find different way to produce and transfer that hydrogen, and that would affect the price of the hydrogens. What we are trying to do here is none of those. Actually, we are producing hydrogens in a small scale to use that as energy carriers. So in a way, it's a different type of energy storage system. So our project with HDF would be able to fix the intermittent characteristic of renewable energies We produce renewables power at night, or maybe if we use the wind, when the wind blows, we use a part of that electricity to supply to our off-taker. And then the remaining power generation, we convert that to hydrogens to use at night. The thing here is that we are not going to compress that hydrogen into liquid form. So that would save a lot of energies. And at night, we just run the hydrogens in a compressed gaseous form through the fuel cell to produce electricity. The reason why we are doing it now, because as I shared with you in the beginning, the permit and license, even though encouraged by the government, they are encouraging for self-consumption and hydrogen projects. It would take at least 1.5 or 2 years. So we are betting on several things. First of all, we are betting that the price of electrolyzers will reduce in the futures. Second, we are betting that the retail price, electricity price in Vietnam will increase. So in a way, by 2024, 2025, we would be able to compete and offer a cheaper price than the retail price at that time.
Wow.
I can tell you this, like right now, at the moment we are talking, if we are producing power from that type of technologies, I can compete with some of the commercial price right now, but not for the residential or industrial price. That's why we have to choose a smaller scale, build a pilot project to prove to the market that, okay, we are going to make it happen. It could be built here in Vietnam. And it also reflects another mindset in Saigon Asset Management, is that we believe renewable energy is a trend. So no one can resist that, but to make it more reliable, to improve its penetration to the grid, energy storage must be used. So it's whether battery storage system or hydrogen storage. In fact, at SAM, we are looking at 2 ways at the same time, but each of those would have different application for different scale, and the hydrogen just move a little bit faster than the other type. So
yeah, I more or less I agree with you that LNG now is facing fuel crisis, and the government already instruct MOIT to reduce certain of the project in the PDPS with gas power generation, and they put let's say a very initial thinking about hydrogen, and I believe that your project would be very promising. I'm not sure whether this will become a model in the future, but I would love to see it's successful and it happen all around in Vietnam. That would be very promising to all of us. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hoang. Yeah.
I consider it's just a part of the whole power generation system. So it would have a part in that market, but how big the part is, we have to try with the pilot first and see how it goes.
Totally agree with you. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hoang. And come to Mr. Thinh. I understand that you are now operating around 100 megawatt wind power, onshore wind power. So what is your most difficulty so far during your operation?
Okay, first of all, we all of us agree that Vietnam, we have many potential for wind and solar from north to south. Okay, and Vietnam also needs the power for development. For example, at this moment, the north of Vietnam, they're facing the lacking of energy power for coming year. It's a very good chance for renewable energy in Vietnam. But you know, for finished projects up to this moment, we have 3 projects under operation. But we are facing the most difficulty now is our curtailment. Yeah. Because recent year, 2 years ago, the solar power coming, and last year the 4,000 megawatt of wind coming, and the power grid is not follow the PDB. Almost grid by EVN delay, not months but years. So power curtailment is a very big issue for us at this moment. And we have also in our association, we have some project now failed to meet the deadline of feed-in tariff. And after 1 year, no any policy for them. Almost project finished. It means that on project cost done, but no income. So it's a very, very, very poor situation at this moment. It's for current project, but for future project, you know, we have no policy for making the feasibility study of project, for financing, for everything, because no PDP approved, no policy, option or feed-in tariff or transition, nothing. It's a current situation for wind energy and solar energy in Vietnam is very poor at this moment. I can say like this.
By the way, because you talk about the curtailment risks, and I see that Mr. Hoang project somehow may solve that issue. Do you think, Mr. Hoang and Mr. Thinh, do you think this is an idea? Because you have redundant energy that cannot put on the grid. Mr. Hoang project may have with that, but from practical point of view, Mr. Thinh, from financing and project management point of view, do you think it is suitable for your project at the moment? Please, Mr. Thinh first.
For you know the issue of renewable energy in Vietnam is not the energy producer, but the energy consumer. Yeah, in some area like central of Vietnam, sometimes we have a redundant power cannot transfer to other area. So the good way is to use locally or to storage by some way, for example, hydrogen or battery or something. But the issue is how about the economic term of view? It's physical or not? Because like Mr. Hoang said that retail price of energy at this moment is very low. It's depend on the strategy of each investor. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Thinh. And Mr. Hoang, do you think, like with that curtailment risks, let's say if your pilot project becomes successful, it will have to reduce the risks with the curtailment?
I think that the application of my project is to produce reliable and stable renewable power all day and night. So it's a little bit different from ancillary service for congestion node. To solve the congestion nodes, I think is quite important for the government to issue some guidelines related to the capacity market ancillary service. So that would give incentive for investor to put in some type of energy storage system. It doesn't matter if that hydrogens. It could be flywheel. It could be battery energy storage system. It could also be some kind of pump storage if the scale is right. So I think it depends mostly on the regulators at this moment.
Agree.
And
Yes.
and it would be, you know, a very small, actually very small part of the whole power system here, because even though we talk about curtailments, I think the actual situation is that curtailment is not that bad right now in Vietnam. I know a lot of wind projects who practically haven't had any curtailment since last year.
Yeah, I think it depends on the location really, and some province already been too hot with the development. I wish to talk with you 1 hour more, but we just have 10 or 5 minutes left. So I have maybe next one.
Don't worry.
Sure. You are welcome. And Mr. Oman, because you make the investment here, and from the eye of the foreign investor, what is your recommendation for the newcomer with the Vietnam market?
Well, I think that's a difficult question. Just to keep it short, it's a difficult market. I think that there's certainly some benefits being a local developer. However, if you look at the past, there are some success stories, some large success stories, but there are also quite a number that have not been successful. And as for us, I mean, we are certainly keen and interested in Vietnam, and we see that as the market matures, more and more larger players will start entering the market. Most recently, last week, EDPR acquired some assets from Thuan Tann of 255 megawatts. But these are all secondary transactions on projects that are already operational. For new developments, I think the policy is not there yet for utility scale projects, and that's going to be a challenge moving forward. However, the CNI market itself is getting more interesting. That is something we are also actively looking at, and we are hoping that there's going to be a bit more deregulation in the market, so that we can have more corporate PPAs with larger scale projects. And I think that would be something that would be more attractive for other foreign investors to come in as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the trend in the short and long term would be the corporate PPA. Yeah. But in the short term, I think EVN would be the most important player here in the market. And I believe this is the last question to Mr. Hai and all of you, if you have input, that what and when do you expect that offshore wind be booming and come into operation?
Yeah, I can take the first one, and then other panelists can chip in. Yeah, so offshore wind, obviously, greenfield investment like this, we need to be patient a bit about the framework, because we at this stage, as you know, that site survey license, things like that is still pending for a number of applicants. 4 gigawatt in the north and 3 gigawatt in the south is still subject to a number of site survey. And actually the Monterey working on the draft decree to amend decree 11 to arrest some issue to allow for continued site survey application, but this is not fully addressed. Some of the detail in the recent draft is still have some issue like exclusivity right and development right for those who developer bear the cost for site survey. As we all know, you are all expert. The cost for PFS and site survey wind measurement for LiDAR installation is a significant investment for offshore wind developer. I mean, in case they are the outcome from the site survey subject to a more competitive bidding process, then the question is whether the cost for investment would be reasonably spent for exchange of development right. So we see not clear that the existing private sector, private investment firm under PPP law. There's some more guideline around the additional bonus or incentive for those who incur the cost for PFS work, but the private investment firm is not very clear. That's why right now at McKenzie we support one of the international embassy and organization on the study for the use of existing law of Vietnam, like PPP law, whether we can use them to prepare for some kind of mechanism so that developer from offshore wind sector can go ahead with existing framework for 7 GW by 2030. So timing actually not much actually if we invest in offshore wind sector. Obviously, if we really need to have a full legal framework for offshore wind, it takes several years, because at least from a legal perspective, decree from the government need to be issued, not at a MOIT or Prime Minister decision anymore, because it more involved like Monre, Vasi, MOIT, different decree from investment, bidding, natural resources, size survey, seabed list, all these details need to be addressed in a number of regulations. So I want to keep it short, but I believe that this is still a future for Vietnam, and actually a lot of investment has been ongoing. So I think Vietnam offshore wind sector is quite potential in the coming years.
Thank you, Mr. Hai. It means that when we talk about the regulation, let's sit back and be patient with the government, right? It cannot be fast, and we all know in the past it can never be fast. Any other comment from the panelists here? Otherwise, I can finish our discussion, and we will save some time for Q&A section if our audience has any question.
I have a small comment for that offshore wind.
Please.
I think that when we talk about offshore wind, we can try to look at the case studies of when Vietnam start inviting overseas investor for oil and gas projects, because it will involve a lot of similar government bodies to make decision for that. You will have the military, the public securities, people at Monre, MOIT, MPI, MOJ, MOFA. So it's important to look at that at case study. The second thing is, as Oman share, Vietnam is not an easy market. So if overseas investor coming to Vietnam and expect an equity IRR mid-teen, and that's practically impossible. So if they want to reach that, okay, they may reach that after the project got operation through several types of finance, restructuring, things like that. But when they come here and develop the project, it's safe to say 10-11% is already at the high end. And the third thing is, if they want to develop offshore wind projects, I would strongly suggest that they would start talking with PetroVietnam or its subsidiaries. Because if we look at the oil and gas case study, PetroVietnam is the state-owned bodies working in those seas. So they have a lot of experience. They would have some, purpose to be there as well. So that's quite important to understand and acknowledge those. Otherwise, overseas investor can spend a lot of money going alone for several years, but in the end, they will see a more attractive market elsewhere, not here.
Thank you. I agree. And thank you for the recommendation on working with PetroVietnam. I think that's a valid point for the investor. Yeah. And I see Miss Dr. Nguyen raised the hand.
Yes, I am. I just a few short points. First of all, let me go back to the hydrogen and curtailment. I would say producing hydrogen from curtailment is very expensive, so it's not viable way until up to 2040, 2050, because we has been experiencing for about more than 30 hydrogen projects globally with very major market like in the UK, in New Zealand, in Ireland. So from in terms of regulation and grid operator, my recommendation is top proposing producing hydrogen from curtailment, and that is a job to strengthen the grid. Yeah. And back to offshore wind, yeah, fully agree with Mr. Nghiem that we have too many policy stakeholders for offshore wind. It may be better to have only one or two stakeholders. That is the leading organization. Secondly, I think Vietnam offshore wind, the advantage is that we already have many true developer investor, and we have the real resource, and we have the good supply chain like Petro Vietnam that Mr. Hoang mentioned, and PTSC, so on, and the port. And we have the supply chain regarding construction and so on. However, the disadvantage would be that maybe we look at the way we learn from other countries in terms of consultancy, maybe there's some issue with quality. Yeah, so that's my comment.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Nguyen. I see one question here in the Q&A box, and I believe this question related more or less to Mr. Hai. But any one of you, if you have further comment, please chip in. Mr. Hai, can you answer the question?
Sure. Thanks for the question. Will the delay in issue of PDPA affect the land clearing process for projects that had not yet granted the land use certificate? Of course, there's still some effect, but the question is whether they affect and directly affect or not. This is questionable on a project by project basis. The PDPA more to govern for those projects like new investment project in under the greenfield investment. So for those projects already under construction, or even though the land use right certificate had yet to be issued, but if the project company already obtained like approval from the province for master planning for lands, and also land clearance process had been basically complete, compensation had been made, and also land decision from the Tran and the PPC had been issued, then land lease agreement had been signed, and it's very close to the right for land use right certificate. So it is just a matter of time to submit application and also pay rental to settle the remaining procedure. It's more procedural rather than the right. But for those projects, this is very near early stage, when still waiting for PDPA, and pre-FS work is just been done, but there's still some conflict with other master plan, land planning master plan, or mineral master plan. This is more complex, and in this kind there should be some clearance of that mismatch of master planning. So this is really project by project basis. From our experience, we have been working like many projects, and no answer fit the same for one project. But I'm happy to discuss with those who have raised question in more further detail to address specific question for specific project.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hai, and hopefully that address some of the concern of the Ms. Tu here. I believe we come to an end of our discussion. I would like to take this chance to thank you, our panelists. Your comment and point of view are very valuable to not only our audience, but to all of us as the panelists and the moderator. Thank you all of you, and thank you the audience. Be patient with us during the discussion. Back to Cheryl, please. Cheryl, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. So thank you, Mr. Trung, and thank you for all the panelists and It's a quite informative discussion today. So, well, once again, thank you to all of our guests for your support in making this webinar possible and promoting the exchange of ideas in the industry. Well, if you wanted to get more information, visit us in Vietnam in October, and thank you to our guests and audience for your 2 hours company today. Time always flies. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.